So I'm talking about starting a homeschool co-op, and I think that it's actually a really good option for so many families this year because we can't necessarily rely on a charter school class or a 4-H activity. There's so many activities that we were able to rely on in the past that at this point we really can't because of local mandates or statewide mandates, whatever it is that's saying that we can't gather. And so one of the options that I think is going to be really important for families this season is doing small co-ops of people that you're already in community with, and in this way being able to develop some of the meet some of those needs that your students have. And I'm going to talk about a few whys real quick before I talk about the hows. So, a few reasons to do a homeschool co-op. One would be for the community. It's such a beautiful way to build community. We're actually in a classical conversations group this year, and it's not people that I necessarily had a relationship with before we started, but I just so appreciate the consistent community and the way that consistent community builds deeper relationships. It builds the kind of transparency that we as moms need when we're in this homeschooling journey. If we always keep up a good face on things, we can't really get the help we need it when there is a crisis. But when you've been with people week after week and they've seen you on the bad days, they've seen your children maybe misbehave at class, or they've seen you, deal with the stuff of life, those become your true community, the people who are there for you. And so I feel like doing a co-op of some kind is a stunning way to build community. The second reason is accountability. Often we can think, oh, my child is so far behind, or I don't know, how we're doing in this subject or that subject. But when we're gathering with other families every week, we have an opportunity to kind of assess, oh, hey, actually, my child is kind of on track because this other child is the same age and they're doing this, or, oh, wow, my child's speech is very unclear. Maybe I need to get some help from a speech therapist. So I think that the second reason after community is accountability. It can help us pick up on areas that we're struggling in or help affirm the areas that we're strong in. The third reason that I love a co-op is the way it builds new skills. When we were in our early years of homeschooling, we did an early American history co-op, and a mom came in and taught us all how to make soap, and that was something we'd never done before. Another mom came and taught candle making. So there's so many things that we can learn in community that maybe we don't know how to teach. Later on, we did a different kind of co-op, and at this one, there's a mom here who was really interested in science, was proficient at it, and she taught the high school biology class. And that was such a fantastic experience for my homeschoolers. So I think that when we join a co-op or we get together in a co-op situation, it helps so much with building new skills that we maybe don't have or filling in some of those gaps in our own learning. Okay, so then how to start a co-op is the next question. And I'm just going to briefly share about a few different co-ops we've had. Early on, we had a very involved co-op. We dressed up every week. We shared a themed lunch. The host at that time would prepare, a Viking stew if we were studying the Vikings, or they made some kind of pioneer food if we were studying the pioneers. So one of them, it involved dress up, it involved a full meal, it involved the children all doing presentations. We would, I still remember we were studying the Vikings again, and we all went out and sat on a bench and pretended that we were rowing a longboat. So, the co-ops were the places where we did some of the more special activities. And I know for families who are using the Playful Pioneers and you have a lot of young children, sometimes, or any of the Peaceful Press resources, sometimes those projects can get overwhelming. And what a co-op does is it gives you an opportunity to do those projects in community instead of trying to plan it all out yourself. So that might be where you do the pie baking, or it might be where you, try dipping beeswax candles for the first time. So another co-op later on was more like a little class co-op where each mom took on a subject. So the first co-op was a real community. Each mom traded around hosting. Each mom traded around whether they did the craft or the timeline or whatever the activities were. And then at each meeting, and at that point we were meeting about once a month, at each meeting, the children had an opportunity to share presentations. Then another co-op later, we split off into classes. So I taught like a elementary years anatomy or bird anatomy class or something, and another mom taught a high school science class, and another mom taught a history class. And at that particular co-op, we traded off homes, whoever was hosting, and we also did it every 2 weeks. And at that co-op, we worked on some memory work. It might have been poetry, it might have been classical conversations memory work. So that was another co-op structure. We've also been in bigger co-ops where you actually pay somebody and it's at a facility. There's one in our community where we're actually paying tutors and all the children are going and somebody else is teaching them. And then we've also done classical conversations, which is very expensive. It wouldn't be my first recommendation for the early years because it's very expensive. It's an awkward place with babies. And I think the cost is probably one of my biggest kind of inhibitors for it. But the thing about classical conversations is the afternoon program, if you have a good tutor, it's fantastic. And we have a great tutor in ours. And so our children have that accountability factor and also that new skills factor where we have a teacher who's really excited about teaching the essentials of the English language, the grammar program they have. And so it's been a real blessing at this stage in my homeschool journey to have that. The other kind of co-op that I had was one where one mom and I just traded back and forth. So instead of us all getting together on the same day, one day a week she taught my kids and one day a week I taught her kids. And if you're a working mom, that would be a really wonderful option for you to be able to teach your children and not be at home, be able to have your kids continue learning without you necessarily being the one teaching them every day, especially in this situation where the schools are closed. If you have a sister-in-law or a close friend where you're already in community together, that's a fantastic option. The things that we did to start a co-op, the first thing we did was pick a focus. So for many of you that might be using the Playful Pioneers co-op guide or the Kind Kingdom, you might be using one of those guides for your co-op. And then others of you might be wanting to kind of just pick your own thing or a time period. One of the co-ops that we did, we decided we were going to study American history. And so we only met once a month. 1 month was the Revolutionary War. Another month was the Civil War. Another month was immigration. Every month we had some kind of a theme. And then each family in their own home was using whatever curriculum they normally would use. But when we came together, we would do presentations, we would work on a timeline together, maybe do a geography activity, definitely do some kind of craft or handwork. So that was, one of the big kind of ways that it helped bring our co-op together was just having a focus. And then after you figure out what you want to study that year, the next thing would be finding some friends to study with. So I think that you can make a huge co-op. Some friends started one down in a town near us, and it's grown maybe to like 100 families. But in this climate right now, that's not necessarily a great option. And so what we usually did is we just had it about 4 or 5 families, and then it was easy to switch around to each other's homes. We weren't dependent on a facility being open, and it was really easy to keep going. Obviously, you have to check on insurance situations, liability, those kinds of things. But we had typically small family-centered co-ops that we hosted in our homes. And then that provided just this wonderful, monthly or biweekly opportunity to get together with the people that we were already in community with and really already loved and wanted to spend time with. So, the first step is picking a focus for the year, deciding what you want to teach, whether it's core subjects, whether it is an opportunity to do science experiments in a group or to do the hands-on projects that you don't get to at home. But the first thing was focus. The second thing is find some friends to do it with. And then the next thing I wanted to mention is developing a schedule. And so for our co-op, what we did is we would develop a schedule for the whole year, kind of like the Playful Pioneers co-op download that's available on the Peaceful Press website. So every month we had these categories, and then one mom would be in charge with of the cooking. Another mom would be in charge of bringing a notebooking or timeline activity. Another mom would be in charge of the craft. And having that kind of a schedule set up really helped throughout the year with the planning, because it can get so, once we get started with the school year, it can get pretty overwhelming trying to keep everything going. And so having a really good schedule ahead of time. And I've started a couple co-ops since then that sort of fell apart. And I think that when you're too laid back about it in the beginning, or you're afraid to take the lead, that can make it sort of fall apart. But when you set up a schedule and everybody's committed to an activity before the year starts, it makes it a lot easier to have that follow through. The fourth thing was we had some rules. So, if you're hosting this in your home, you want to make sure that there's kind of general rules for the children that everybody agrees on, or rules for interrupting, or rules for presentations, so that it doesn't, get so burdensome. I remember one co-op that I did, this was one setup where I had this amazing activity set that I was so excited about. And it wasn't as impressive to some of the kids. And I think having some basic courtesy rules ahead of time can really help with avoiding conflict, or avoiding conflict between the children. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was just making sure you delegate. Not one person could be in charge of everything. And one of you might be a really good administrator. And so you're going to be the one who kind of makes the plan and tells people, makes the plan for the year. But there needs to be assignments sent out and everybody chipping in on it if it's going to be sustainable. Otherwise, you probably need to charge money for it. And I think that that's a really great option. There's lots of people who have great administration skills and maybe want to start a co-op and charge money for it. We never charged money for our co-ops. What we did is, families would either chip in on the material fees, or if there was something special that we needed, everyone would buy their own materials for their kids. So those were kind of some basic things. I put the link to my blog post on co-ops in the chat. And then we have about 15 minutes. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have about starting a co-op. It's such a beautiful way to develop community. I think it's a really important strategy right now for giving our kids some social time and giving ourselves some accountability and kind of sharing the load. It's a beautiful way of developing a stronger community in our communities. And I think in the days that we're in, where things are a little bit serious and intense, having community is so important